When I turned 65, I threw a party for the family. No one came. That same day, my daughter-in-law posted photos of everyone on a cruise. I just smiled. When they came back, I handed her a DNA test that made her go pale. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the empty house. The cake I had baked for my family sat untouched on the kitchen counter, its layers of frosting starting to harden under the dry, warm air. I stared at it for a moment, the silence in the house growing louder. No one had shown up. Not my son, not my daughter-in-law, not my grandchildren. I had prepared everything. Each detail was perfect, a reflection of the care I had always given to my family. It was supposed to be a celebration, but instead, I was left alone, wondering if I had done something wrong. I had always done my best. I had worked tirelessly to provide for them, to support my son, John, through his struggles, to be the constant presence in their lives. Yet, here I was, abandoned on what was supposed to be a special day. I had called, I had texted, and still, no one came. Then, the phone rang. It was my daughter-in-law, Emily. "Sorry, Mom. We're all away on a surprise family vacation." "Didn't John tell you?" she said, her voice light, almost rehearsed. I forced a smile as I hung up the phone. The fact that they hadn't bothered to let me know before didn't surprise me. Emily had always been like that, polite, but distant, too caught up in her own world to care about the people around her. It wasn't the first time. I remembered the Christmas 2 years ago when they had told me they were too busy to come over, but I later saw photos of them celebrating with all their friends, enjoying a lavish dinner. Living their best life, they called it. That night, the feeling of being forgotten weighed heavy on my heart. But this time, it was different. This wasn't just a missed party. This was something deeper, something colder. I had no idea what had changed, but I knew that I was tired of playing the fool. I had spent decades putting others first, making sure their needs were met while mine were pushed aside. It was time to stop pretending I didn't know what was going on. The secrets they thought I was too old to understand, the manipulations they believed I couldn't see. It was time to take control. And so, I kept quiet. I didn't raise a fuss. I didn't cry. I simply took a step back and watched. I waited. The longer I kept quiet, the more they revealed themselves. A few days later, after they returned from their vacation, Emily came over to apologize. She had that same sweet smile, the one she always wore when she was trying to get something. She asked if I was okay, if I needed anything. I nodded, my eyes calm, but inside, I was watching, waiting for her to slip. And she did. "You know, I've been thinking," she said, her voice soft. "Maybe you should sell this house. It's just too much for you now." I could feel the sting of her words, but I didn't react. Instead, I simply smiled and said, "I'll think about it." That night, I went to my safe and retrieved the letter. It was time to reveal everything. I couldn't let them get away with it anymore. I had my own plans. I wasn't going to be their pawn anymore. They had underestimated me for too long. I sat quietly at the kitchen table, staring at the cold cup of tea in front of me. It had been a week since my birthday, a day that was supposed to be filled with love and celebration, but instead, it had been a harsh reminder of how little my family truly cared. The silence in the house was deafening. I hadn't heard from my son, John, or Emily, my daughter-in-law, since that day. It was as if I had never existed in their world. But I wasn't going to let that silence define me. I wasn't going to break. The more they ignored me, the more I saw the truth about how they viewed me. I spent the next few days watching them, observing how they interacted with each other, how they avoided me like I was invisible. It was a subtle game of manipulation, but I wasn't blind. I had lived long enough to know when something wasn't right. Emily had always been distant, but after my husband's passing, she became colder, almost calculating. I couldn't help but notice how she would say one thing to my face and something entirely different when she thought I wasn't listening. The little comments she made when John wasn't around, the way she would ask about money, about the house, her intentions were becoming clearer with each passing day. I began to think back to all the times they had tried to change things, pushing me to sell the house, suggesting I move to a smaller place. Every suggestion felt more like a plan than concern. And John, he had always been the golden boy, the son I could count on. But now, it felt like he was being swayed, manipulated into thinking that his wife's suggestions were more important than his own mother's needs. It wasn't just the house that they wanted. It was everything. Emily had never been shy about her opinions on money. I'd seen her glance at the family pictures on the walls, her eyes lingering on the house, the possessions, as though she were calculating the value of everything. I had kept quiet about the inheritance. I had kept quiet about everything, thinking that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't necessary to say anything. I had raised my son with love. I had worked hard to provide for him. And yet, in the end, he had become a stranger to me. And Emily? She was the real mastermind behind everything. I knew it, but I wasn't ready to confront them just yet. I wanted to see how far they would go, how far they would push me before I made my move. I had made the decision not to tell them about the inheritance. $8 million. That was the amount I had inherited when my husband passed. I could have told them the moment it came through. I could have shared the news and asked for their support, but something told me to wait. I didn't trust them, not after the way they had been treating me. So I kept quiet. I decided to watch. I decided to see how they would act when they thought I had nothing left. A week passed, and then, one afternoon, John came over. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table, his face tense. "Mom," he said, his voice low, "we need to talk." I didn't respond right away. I just waited, my hands folded in my lap, my gaze steady. "You know, Emily and I have been talking," he continued, "about what's best for you. Maybe it's time we start looking at some options." I already knew where this was going. The conversation was familiar. It was the same thing they had said before. They wanted me out of the house. They wanted to sell it. They wanted to take control of everything. I kept my expression neutral, not giving away anything. "What kind of options?" I asked quietly. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding my gaze. "Well, maybe it's time for you to think about moving into one of those retirement communities. You know, somewhere smaller, easier to manage." I let his words hang in the air, the silence growing between us. "I see," I said calmly. "And what does Emily think about this?" "She's just concerned about you, Mom. We're trying to look out for you." I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. I could feel the walls closing in, but I remained calm. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice steady. Inside, I was already planning. I wasn't going to let them push me out. I wasn't going to let them take everything away from me without a fight. I had my own plan. I had made my choice. And now, it was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. I watched John leave the kitchen, his shoulders stiff, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. It was the same conversation again, the same manipulative tactics wrapped in concern. But this time, I knew better. I wasn't going to fall for it. I sat there for a while, letting the silence settle over me. The house felt so empty without my husband. The walls that had once held laughter now seemed to close in around me, filled with nothing but their expectations. They thought I was old, fragile, that I would crumble under the pressure. But I wasn't broken, not yet. And I wouldn't let them break me. As the evening passed, I kept thinking about what John had said, about the future they wanted for me. Retirement community, smaller house. What was next? Would they decide what I ate, where I went, when I could see my friends? I had always taken care of them, always put their needs first, but now it seemed like they had no interest in looking after me. It was all about control. That night, as the darkness settled over the house, I walked into the living room and ran my fingers over the edges of the old leather armchair. This chair had been where my husband sat every night, watching TV, laughing at the jokes, sharing stories from his day. It felt like part of him still lingered there, but I knew that soon I would have to let go of it all. They wanted me to leave. They wanted to sell everything, even the memories that lived in these walls. And that was something I couldn't let happen without a fight. I walked over to the fireplace, where the old family portraits were displayed, and I ran my hand over the glass frame. Each picture brought back a flood of memories, of the family dinners, of birthdays and holidays, of the years I spent raising John and watching him grow into the man he was. A man who now barely looked me in the eye, who saw me as a burden, as someone to be discarded. I couldn't let him win. I couldn't let Emily win either. I had to take back control of my own life, of my own future. I had kept quiet for too long, thinking that silence would keep the peace. But it was clear now that silence had only made them more bold, more arrogant. They thought I didn't know what they were up to. They thought I was too old, too weak to fight back. But they were wrong. The next morning, I made a decision. I went to my safe and retrieved the papers I had been holding onto since the moment the inheritance check came through. The $8 million. I had kept it hidden from them, not because I didn't trust them, but because I knew they would try to take it from me if they knew. It was my money, my security. And now, it was time to use it. I had the lawyer's number saved in my phone, and I called him that afternoon. I needed him to draw up the papers, the documents that would ensure that no one could touch my assets, that no one could force me out of my home. I knew Emily would fight me, would try to manipulate John into going against me. But I had a plan. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I would show them that they couldn't just push me aside. When the lawyer called me back the next day, I could hear the surprise in his voice when I explained what I needed. He said it would take time, that there were legal hurdles to jump through, but he promised me he would take care of it. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. This was it. The beginning of the end for their control over me. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. I had worked hard for everything I had. My husband and I had built a life together, a life I was proud of. And now, I would protect it. As I hung up the phone, I felt a quiet strength inside me, a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. The fight wasn't over, but I knew I had made the right choice. I was ready. I had nothing left to lose, but everything to gain. The days that followed felt like a quiet storm brewing, one I could see coming but had no control over. I spent my time in the house, watching it slowly empty of its warmth, of the life it once held. John had stopped by only once since our conversation, his eyes avoiding mine, as if he could no longer face the woman who had raised him. Emily hadn't even bothered to call. It was as if I no longer existed in their world. I felt the weight of it all pressing down on me, but I knew I couldn't break. I had to hold firm, even if it meant standing alone. I sat in the living room that evening, watching the flicker of the fireplace, the only source of light in the darkened room. The house, once filled with laughter and the buzz of family life, now seemed cold, empty, and distant. I felt a strange sense of betrayal settle in my chest, but I pushed it away. This wasn't the time to cry or feel sorry for myself. I had a plan. I had to move forward. The papers from my lawyer had arrived, and I spent hours reading through them, ensuring every detail was perfect. The inheritance, the protection of my assets, it all felt so surreal. It was mine, all of it, but for so long, I had kept it hidden, unsure if anyone else would ever appreciate the years of hard work that had gone into building what we had. But now, with the inheritance in hand and the legal papers finalized, I knew it was time to act. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. I had to protect what was rightfully mine, and I had to stand my ground. The next morning, as I sat at the kitchen table, the phone rang. It was Emily. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. "Hello, Margaret," she said, her voice sounding too sweet, too rehearsed. "I was just wondering if you've given any thought to what we talked about. You know, moving to a smaller place, something more manageable." I could hear the subtle hint of concern in her voice, but I knew better. She wasn't concerned. She was scheming. "I've thought about it," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "But I'm not ready to make a decision yet." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. "Well, just let us know when you're ready," she said, before quickly hanging up. I knew what she was really asking. She wanted to know if I was going to sell the house, if I was going to give in to their pressure. But I wasn't going to. I had spent too many years in this home, building a life with my husband, raising my son, creating memories. It wasn't just a house, it was my home, and no one was going to take that from me. That afternoon, as I went about my day, I found myself standing in the garden, looking at the flowers my husband had planted all those years ago. The roses were in full bloom, their petals soft and fragrant, a reminder of the love and care he had put into everything. He had always taken pride in this garden, and now, as I stood there, I realized that it was time for me to take pride in my own life again. No more silence. No more hiding. I had done everything for them. Now, it was time to do something for me. Later that evening, John came over, his steps hesitant as he entered the house. He looked at me with those same eyes, the ones that had once held love and respect, but now seemed distant and cold. "Mom," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." I nodded, motioning for him to sit. The time had come. "What is it, John?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the pounding of my heart. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his gaze flicking to the floor. "I've been thinking," he started, "about what's best for you. I think it's time we start looking at options for your future." I held up my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "John, I've made my decision," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not going anywhere." He looked at me, confusion and frustration written across his face. "What do you mean?" he asked. "You're not thinking of staying here, are you? It's too much for you. You don't need all this space." I stood up, walking over to the window, looking out at the garden once more. "I've lived here for over 30 years, John. I'm not going to just leave because you and Emily think it's time for me to move on." He was silent for a moment, before speaking again, his voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "You know, Emily and I were just trying to help. We want what's best for you." I turned to face him, my gaze unyielding. "What's best for me, John, is that I get to decide what happens to my life. Not you. Not Emily. Me." I could see the struggle in his eyes, the pull between loyalty to his wife and his mother. But I wasn't going to make it easy for him. "I've already made arrangements," I continued. "I'm not moving anywhere, and I'm not selling this house." There was a long pause before he finally spoke, his voice softer now. "I just want you to be happy, Mom. I want you to be taken care of." "I will be," I replied, my voice unwavering. "And so will you, John. I'll make sure of that." The following days passed in a haze of routine. The house remained eerily quiet, save for the sounds of my own footsteps and the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath me. I had made my decision, and with that decision came a strange sense of peace, though the undercurrent of tension never fully left. John came by again a few days later, his expression still distant, though. Now there was a hint of guilt in his eyes. I could tell he wasn't sure how to navigate this new version of me. "Mom," he said, standing at the threshold of the living room. "I've been thinking about what we talked about." I didn't say anything, just waited for him to continue. "I still think it's for the best if you consider moving, but I've been doing some thinking too." His voice trailed off, and I could see the internal battle waging within him. He was torn between his loyalty to Emily and the nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, he was on the wrong side. "I don't know what Emily's told you," he said, his voice quieter now, "but we only want what's best for you. I'm worried about you being alone here." I held up a hand, cutting him off. "John, I've spent the last few years of my life alone, but I've never been lonely. Not until now." His eyes widened, a flicker of understanding crossing his face, but I could tell it wasn't enough. "What do you mean?" he asked. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden again, the place that had become my refuge in the midst of all this chaos. "I've been alone for years, John," I said softly, "and I've learned to live with it. But it's not just about the house, is it? It's about control. It's about you and Emily wanting me out of the picture so you can have everything." I turned to face him then, my eyes steady. "I'm not going anywhere. Not because I can't, but because I choose not to. I choose to stay in this house, in the life I've built, even if that means standing alone." He didn't respond right away, and I could see the struggle written all over his face. He wanted to argue, to fight for Emily's side, but a part of him was finally starting to see the truth. "You're not the woman I thought you were," he said finally, his voice low. "You've changed." "Maybe I have," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "But I'm not the one who's changed, John. You and Emily have changed. You've forgotten who I am, who I've always been. I've always been there for you, always put you first, but now that things are different, you think you can just push me aside." There was a long pause, and for a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. John shifted uncomfortably, his hands clenched at his sides. "I don't know what you want me to do," he said finally. "I want you to stop treating me like I'm invisible," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I want you to stop making decisions for me, like you know what's best for me. I want you to see me for who I am, not just as some burden you have to deal with." John looked at me for a long moment, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years: remorse. "I don't know if I can fix this, Mom," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can make things right." "Maybe you can't," I said, my voice softening. "But you can start by listening to me. I don't need you to fix anything. I just need you to stop trying to control everything." He nodded slowly, as if the weight of my words was beginning to sink in. "I'll think about what you said," he muttered, before turning and walking toward the door. "I'm not going anywhere, John," I said, my voice low but firm. "And neither are you." When the door closed behind him, I felt a strange sense of finality. Things were different now, and they were never going to be the same again. But I was okay with that. I wasn't going to be the same person I had been before. I wasn't going to be the woman who had let herself be overlooked, ignored, and pushed aside. I was going to be someone who fought for herself. I had spent too many years putting everyone else first, and now, it was time for me to put myself first. No more silence. No more hiding. I had made my choice, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. The following days unfolded with a quiet sense of tension. The air in the house felt heavy, and the weight of what I had said to John lingered between us, unspoken but present. He hadn't come by again, and Emily's calls had stopped as well. It was as if they were waiting for me to make the next move, but I wasn't going to make it easy for them. I spent my time in the garden, where the roses my husband had planted still bloomed beautifully, a quiet reminder of the life we had shared. It felt like I was waiting for something to happen, something to break, but I knew it would be on my terms. It was late in the afternoon when John finally returned, his footsteps tentative as he entered the house. I heard him pause at the threshold of the living room, as if unsure of what to say, unsure of how to approach me after our last conversation. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than before. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said." I looked up from my seat at the window and nodded, gesturing for him to sit. "I've realized that maybe I haven't been fair to you," he continued, taking a seat across from me. "I've been so focused on what Emily wants, what she thinks is best for you, that I've forgotten what you need. I'm sorry for that." His words were a relief, though I didn't let my guard down completely. It had taken too long for him to reach this point. "I'm glad you're starting to see things more clearly," I said, my voice steady. But inside, I felt a quiet victory. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but it was a start. "I know I've made mistakes, Mom," he continued, "but I'm trying to make it right. I want you to be happy, and I want you to know that you don't have to be alone in all of this. I want to be there for you." His words hung in the air, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about his own guilt, his own struggle with what had been happening behind the scenes. "John," I said softly, "it's not about whether I'm alone or not. It's about respect. It's about you and Emily seeing me as more than just someone you can push around." He looked down, his eyes filled with remorse. "I know, Mom. I know. I've been blinded by everything that's been going on. But I want to make things right. I want to show you that I'm not just going to follow along with whatever Emily says." I studied him for a moment, weighing his words. "Actions speak louder than words, John," I said finally. "It's going to take more than just a few apologies to fix what's been broken." He nodded, his expression serious. "I get that. I really do. But I'm willing to try. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right with you." I didn't know if I believed him completely, but there was a flicker of hope in his voice, a sign that maybe, just maybe, he was finally seeing the truth. "We'll see, John," I replied, my voice calm but resolute. "We'll see if you can prove that." As he left the house, I felt a strange sense of quiet satisfaction. It wasn't a happy ending yet, but it was a step in the right direction. The real test would come when Emily realized she couldn't control everything, when she understood that I wasn't going to let her dictate my life anymore. I wasn't sure how things would play out, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be a bystander in my own life. The power had shifted, and it was time for me to take back control, one step at a time. The days following John's visit felt like an uneasy truce. I could sense that the dynamics between us were shifting, but I wasn't ready to fully trust it. Emily hadn't spoken to me since our last encounter, but I knew she wouldn't let things be for long. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was plotting, waiting for the right moment to make her move. The house, once filled with the chaos of family gatherings, had become eerily silent. I spent my days doing the things I had always done, gardening, reading, cooking, but there was a sense of tension in the air that I couldn't ignore. One afternoon, as I was trimming the roses in the garden, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked up to see Emily stepping out of the car, her expression unreadable. My heart skipped a beat, but I remained calm. She walked toward me slowly, and I straightened up, wiping my hands on my apron. "Margaret," she said, her voice smooth, but with an edge of something I couldn't place. "We need to talk." I nodded, not saying anything as she approached. "I know you've been upset with me," she continued, her eyes darting toward the ground before meeting mine again. "But I want you to know that I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I want to make things right." I raised an eyebrow, not believing her words for a second. "Do you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Because it doesn't seem like you've been trying very hard." She sighed, clearly frustrated by my response. "I know it's been hard, but I've been trying to do what's best for you, for all of us." We're just worried about you, Margaret. This house is too much for you to handle alone. You don't get to decide what's best for me, I said firmly, my tone sharper than I intended. I've been handling this house alone for years, and I'm perfectly capable of doing it for many more. There was a brief silence between us as she processed my words. I could see her trying to keep her composure, but there was something behind her eyes, something calculating. I'm not here to fight with you, she said finally, her voice softer now. I just want us to find a way to move forward. For the sake of the family. For the sake of the family? I repeated, incredulous. Is that what you think this is about? Because, Emily, this isn't about family. This is about control. You and John think that if you push me out of here, everything will be easier for you. But it's not going to happen. She stiffened at my words, the mask slipping for just a moment. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this, she said, her voice rising slightly. We're only trying to help you. Why can't you just see that? I took a step toward her, meeting her gaze. Because your version of help involves taking everything that's mine, and I won't stand for that. She blinked, the words clearly hitting harder than she expected. I could see her trying to regroup, but I wasn't going to let her. You don't get to tell me what's best for me. You don't get to decide how I live my life. I've earned my place here, in this house, in this life. And I'm not going anywhere. Emily stood there for a moment, processing my words, her expression faltering as she realized I wasn't backing down. You're making a mistake, she said, her voice quieter now, almost as if she were speaking to herself. I'm just trying to look out for you, Margaret. No, Emily, I said, my voice steady but firm. You're looking out for yourself, and I'm done letting you use me for your own gain. She didn't reply immediately, her mouth opening and closing as if she were trying to find the right words. Finally, she turned and walked back toward her car, not looking back once. I stood there for a long time after she left, the weight of the conversation hanging heavy in the air. It was clear that things weren't over yet. Emily would come back, and she wouldn't give up easily. But I was ready. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back now. I was going to fight for myself, for my life, and for everything I had worked so hard to build. No one was going to take that from me, not without a fight. It had been a week since Emily's visit, and the silence between us was deafening. I could feel the tension building, like a storm on the horizon, ready to break. But I wasn't going to let them break me. I had made my stand, and I wasn't about to back down now. It was late in the evening when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, there stood John, looking more uneasy than I had ever seen him. His eyes avoided mine as he shifted from foot to foot. Mom, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk? I nodded and stepped aside, letting him into the house. He walked in slowly, his movements stiff, like he wasn't sure how to approach me. I led him into the living room, my gaze steady. What's on your mind? I asked, though I already knew. He hesitated, then took a deep breath. I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, and I realized I've been wrong. I didn't say anything, just waited for him to continue. I've been so focused on what Emily wanted, what we both thought was best for you, that I never stopped to really listen to you, he said, his voice shaking slightly. I should have respected you more, Mom. I studied him for a long moment, the sincerity in his voice not going unnoticed. This wasn't the son I had raised, the one who had always been by my side. But now, he was standing in front of me, acknowledging the mistakes he had made. I should have seen it sooner, he continued, his voice breaking, that you were just trying to live your life, and I was trying to control it. I'm sorry. His words hit harder than I expected, but I didn't let my guard down. It was a start, but it wasn't enough. John, I said, my voice firm but calm. Apologies are a good first step, but they don't erase everything. You and Emily have treated me like I don't matter, like I'm just some inconvenience you have to deal with. It's going to take more than just words to fix this. He nodded, looking down at the floor. I know, he said quietly, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I stood up then, walking toward the window, staring out at the garden where the roses had started to wilt. It was as though the fading flowers mirrored my own sense of hope. I'm not asking for your help, John, I said without turning to face him. I'm asking for your respect. I want you to see me as your mother again, not as someone you can push around. I've been doing this on my own for a long time, and I've learned that I don't need anyone's permission to live my life. He stood in silence for a long time before speaking again. I don't want to lose you, Mom, he said softly. I'm afraid of losing you, but I don't know how to fix what's been broken. I turned to face him, my heart heavy, but my resolve unshaken. You don't fix it, John, I said. You show me that you understand. You show me that you're ready to put me first, like I've always put you first. He nodded slowly, his eyes meeting mine for the first time since he walked in. I'll try, Mom. I promise. I just need some time to figure this out, to fix things with Emily, to fix things with you. I studied him for a moment, weighing his words. I'm not asking for perfection, John. I'm asking for honesty, for you to stop hiding behind your guilt and your fears. I want to see the man I raised, the man who stood by me all those years. If you can do that, then maybe, just maybe, we can move forward. He seemed to absorb my words, his shoulders relaxing ever so slightly. I'll try, Mom, he repeated, his voice steady now. I won't let you down again. As he left that night, I felt a strange sense of hope beginning to stir inside me. Maybe things weren't completely broken after all. Maybe, with time, we could rebuild. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. Emily wouldn't give up easily. She would fight, and I would have to be ready for that. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The silence that followed John's departure hung heavily in the air. I sat in the same chair by the window, the light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the room. I had made my stand, but the road ahead was still uncertain. I knew Emily wouldn't let go of her plans so easily, and her resistance would be a force to reckon with. I was still trying to process everything. John's apology was a step in the right direction, but I wasn't naive enough to think it was the end of the story. The next day, Emily showed up at my door, her presence unmistakable. She stood on the threshold, looking more composed than I had expected, her hands clasped in front of her, as if preparing for a difficult conversation. Margaret, she began, her voice measured. We need to talk. I stepped aside, allowing her to enter. She walked in slowly, her eyes scanning the room before landing on me. I know things have been difficult between us, she continued. But I think we both know this isn't working. We can't keep going on like this, pretending everything is fine. I didn't respond right away. I simply motioned for her to sit. Go on, I said calmly, my gaze steady. She sat down, crossing her legs, her posture stiff. I've been thinking about what you said to John, she said, her tone almost too sweet. I've been thinking about how you feel about the house, about your place in the family. I didn't interrupt. I wanted to hear what she had to say. I want to apologize, she said, her voice softening. I didn't mean to make you feel like you're not wanted. We've just been worried about you. You're getting older, Margaret, and we want to make sure you're taken care of. I could see the words she was choosing carefully, like a script she had rehearsed, but I wasn't going to fall for it. I appreciate your concern, I said, my voice steady. But I've been taking care of myself for a long time. I don't need anyone to tell me how to live my life. There was a pause, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of frustration in her eyes. It's not just about you anymore, Margaret, she said, her voice hardening slightly. This house, this situation, it's affecting all of us. We can't keep doing this. You can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. I stood up, walking over to the fireplace, my back turned to her. You don't get to decide what's best for me, Emily, I said calmly, turning back to face her. I've lived here for years, raised my son here, built a life. I'm not going to just leave because you want me to. She stood up then, her face flushed with frustration. This is exactly why we can't move forward, she said, her voice rising. You're too stubborn. You're too set in your ways. You won't listen to anyone, not even your own son. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. It's not about being stubborn. It's about respecting my decisions. You and John have been trying to take everything from me, but I won't let you. Not now, not ever. Emily's face twisted with anger, but she didn't say anything. She stood there for a moment, glaring at me, then walked toward the door. You'll regret this, Margaret, she said as she left, her voice cold. I watched her leave, the door closing with a quiet finality. I knew it wasn't over. I knew Emily would be back, just as John would. But this time I was ready. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. I wasn't going to be the quiet, passive woman they thought I was. I was going to stand my ground. As I stood there in the quiet house, the weight of the decisions I had made settled in. The fight wasn't over, but I was no longer afraid. I had a plan, and I would see it through. I had spent too many years living in the shadow of others' expectations. Now it was my turn. The house was mine, My life was mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. The following days were filled with a heavy tension that I couldn't shake. Every time the doorbell rang or the phone buzzed, I wondered if it was Emily or John, returning with more demands or empty apologies. But when the knock finally came, it wasn't them. It was the lawyer. He had come to finalize the legal papers, the ones that would protect my assets and ensure no one could force me out of my own home. I had kept the details of my inheritance quiet, only sharing them with him. And now, I was ready to take the final step. "Margaret," he said, walking into the living room with the papers in hand. "Everything's in order. You're legally protected." I sat back, letting the words sink in. It was strange, the feeling of control, of knowing that no one could take anything from me anymore. I didn't have to worry about Emily or John's schemes. My future, my home, my choices were mine again. "Thank you," I said quietly, signing the papers without hesitation. The weight I had been carrying for so long seemed to lift, just a little. But I knew the battle wasn't over. Emily would never accept defeat so easily. And John, well, he was caught between loyalty to his wife and his guilt over how things had unfolded. That night, as I sat alone at the kitchen table, I thought about all the years I had spent raising John, trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife. I had given everything to them, and in return, I had been pushed aside, discarded as if I no longer mattered. But I wasn't going to let that be my story. I had built a life for myself, and no one, not even my own flesh and blood, was going to take it from me. The following morning, I received a call from John. His voice was softer than usual, almost hesitant. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" I paused for a moment, considering whether to pick up the phone. I wasn't sure I was ready for another conversation, not after everything that had happened. But I picked it up anyway. "What is it, John?" I asked, my voice steady but calm. "I've been thinking," he began, "about everything. I'm sorry for how I've treated you, how I let Emily take control. I don't want to lose you, Mom." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. I wasn't sure if I could fully forgive him, not yet, but this was a start. "You can't just apologize, John," I said, my voice firm. "You have to show me that you mean it. You have to stop letting her control everything. Stop letting her dictate your actions." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear him thinking. "I know," he finally said, his voice low. "I've been weak, and I've been afraid. But I don't want to lose you. I'll do better. I promise." I could feel my heart soften just a little, but I wasn't ready to let my guard down completely. "I hope you mean that," I said, my tone gentle but resolute. "Because I'm not going to let anyone take what's mine. Not again." After we hung up, I sat back in my chair, the quiet settling around me. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control. I wasn't just some passive participant in my own life. I had a voice, and I was using it. As the days passed, I saw small changes in John. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. He stopped by more often, asking how I was, checking in with me. He started to stand up to Emily more, no longer letting her call all the shots. And though there were still moments of tension, I could see that he was making an effort. But Emily was a different story. She hadn't given up. She sent me a few more texts, trying to convince me to sell the house, to make things easier for everyone. But I ignored them. I wasn't going to be swayed. The house was mine, and it always would be. I wasn't going anywhere. One evening, Emily showed up unannounced, standing at the door with that same practiced smile on her face. "Margaret," she said, her voice sugary sweet, "we need to talk." I didn't invite her in. "What's left to say, Emily?" I asked, crossing my arms. "I've made my decision. This house is staying with me." Her smile faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered. "You're making a big mistake," she said. "You're going to regret this." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in a long while. "You don't get to tell me what I'll regret, Emily," I said calmly. "I'm not going to be intimidated by you or anyone else. I'm done with all of this." She stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to figure out if I was bluffing. But I wasn't. I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to live in fear anymore. "Fine," she said finally, her voice tight with frustration. "But don't say I didn't warn you." And with that, she turned and walked away. I stood there in the doorway, watching her go. I knew it wasn't over. But I also knew that I had won. The power had shifted. I had taken control of my own life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. The days after Emily's visit were quiet, but I could feel the storm brewing. She hadn't given up, I knew that much. I wasn't sure what her next move would be, but I was prepared. She would try something, and when she did, I would be ready to face it head on. I spent my days in the house, going about my routine, but the weight of the silence between me and John lingered. He had been trying, I could see that, but there was still so much left unsaid between us. One morning, I was in the kitchen, preparing my coffee, when I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I knew who it was before I even looked out the window. John. He walked into the kitchen slowly, like he wasn't sure how I would react. His face was tired, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and something else, something that looked like regret. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I nodded, gesturing for him to sit down. "What's on your mind?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, his voice low. "About everything that's happened. About you. About me." I didn't interrupt, letting him gather his thoughts. "I realize I've been wrong," he continued, his voice shaking slightly. "I've let Emily manipulate me, and I've been blind to what's been happening right in front of me. I haven't been there for you like I should have been. I'm sorry, Mom." I looked at him for a long moment, the words sinking in. "It's going to take more than an apology, John," I said softly. "I'm not saying I don't appreciate you finally seeing what's been going on, but you've got a lot to prove. You've got to show me that you really mean it." He nodded slowly, his eyes full of emotion. "I know, Mom. I know I've got a lot to make up for, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." I studied him for a long moment, letting the silence stretch between us. "I want to believe you, John," I said finally, "but actions speak louder than words." He looked down at his hands, then back up at me. "I'll prove it," he said. "I don't want to lose you, Mom. I've already lost so much." I didn't know if he fully understood the gravity of what he was saying, but I wanted to believe him. For my own sake, for the sake of our family, I wanted to believe that things could get better. "We'll see," I said softly, my voice filled with a quiet determination. "But you need to start by standing up to Emily. She can't control everything, and she's not going to control me." He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, his face filled with the kind of emotion I hadn't seen in years. It was a mixture of guilt, fear, and maybe, just maybe, a bit of hope. "I'll talk to her," he said, his voice firming up. "I'll make sure she knows that I'm not going to let her tear this family apart." "Good," I said, my voice steady. "Because I'm not backing down, John. I'm not going to let her walk all over me anymore." There was a long pause as we both sat there, the weight of our conversation settling between us. Finally, he stood up. "I'll go talk to her now," he said, his voice resolute. "I promise, Mom. I'm going to do better." I watched him leave, a mixture of hope and skepticism in my chest. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something better. I wasn't expecting miracles, but I was ready for change. I wasn't the same woman I had been a year ago. I had fought for my life, for my home, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. Not without a fight. The day ended quietly, and though I knew Emily and John's battle for control wasn't over, something in me had shifted. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. I wasn't just going to sit back and let life happen. I was going to live it, on my terms, no matter what.